Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of our Lunchtime Learning webinar series. My name is Brendan Woodruff. I'm the co-chair of the GreenNY Operations and Engagement Subcommittee, and I thank you all for joining us here today. It seems that WebEx wanted to enjoy a little longer of a holiday weekend, and we had a little technical difficulties there, but we've gotten over them now. A couple housekeeping notes before we get started today. Everyone is on mute. If you do have questions as we go along, please type them into the chat box. We will get to them at the end. In addition, this is being recorded and it will be put on the GreenNY website afterwards. So if you want to go back and see the slides or send it along to any of your coworkers or friends, feel free to go find that on the website there. Couple other notes here. The next webinar is going to take place on Tuesday, October 13th, and that's on sustainable takeout. I certainly am going to need that one for myself, and I think a lot of us are these days. In addition, the Green Home Tip section of the GreenNY website is also up now. So all of the recording versions of these, all of our tip sheets, and all of the tips that are on various agencies' websites, from DEC to NYSERDA and NYPA, all in one place on the GreenNY website now under the Green Home Tips section. So make sure to go check that out as well. In addition, we're putting together ideas for the next 6 months of topics. So if you have any, feel free to type those in the chat box as well. And we are always looking for new ideas, as we've been at this for 18 months now, which is pretty impressive. So I thank you all for being a part of it. That being said, let's get into today's presentation. I'm going to hand it over to Peter Van Erp from DEC.
Okay, thank you, Brendan. Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's Lunchtime Learning event. Today, I'm going to talk about proper paint disposal, what to do with leftover paint, and how to avoid having it. I'll discuss how to dispose of unwanted paint now and how that will change in the near future. Before I go on, I want to state that although I will be referring to paint throughout this presentation, that term would include not only paint itself, but also stains, varnishes, shellacs, and many other types of coatings used in and around a person's home. Since March, many of us have been stuck in our homes, stopping the spread, telecommuting, and looking at the same four walls every single day, and perhaps we're inspired to tackle some do-it-yourself projects. As a do-it-yourself project, painting is one of the most common, impactful, and accessible projects for people to complete on their own. With the additional time being spent at home, we went ahead and painted the den or family room, turned office, finished the basement to add more usable space, spruced up the deck or patio area with a fresh coat of paint, maybe even did the whole house, as the slide shows here. It's awesome, looks great, huh? Maybe we weren't so ambitious, and perhaps we just refinished the node table into our new workspace. Whatever our paint project was, we most likely have some leftover paint, maybe a lot of leftover paint, because we didn't want to run out of paint before we were done with our project. Now we just have to figure out what to do with the leftover paint. In a 2007 study prepared for the U.S. EPA, it was estimated that about 10% of all paint purchased goes unused. In New York State, that equates to approximately 4 million gallons of paint annually. This is one metric that has been cited the last few years by those interested in the quantity of paint left unused in New York State. I've also seen industry reports that indicate an annual growth rate of 3.8% in the U.S. coatings industry. So it's maybe grown even more. Just go back to the last slide, please. Nevertheless, a gallon of paint is enough to paint a small bathroom. 4 million gallons is quite a lot of paint to be left around. So we think, well, you would use the leftover paint for any touch-ups we may have to make. We can just put it out in the garage or shed or down in the basement. When we stored the leftover paint from the last project, for most of us, adequate storage space is finite. What are we going to do with all that old paint? It's not even the same color. There must be an easy way to get rid of this old paint. Next slide. Next slide, please. And the problems with leftover paint. Leftover paint becomes waste paint when we decide we no longer want it. Can you go back one slide, please? Leftover paint becomes waste paint when we decide we no longer want it. Maybe it's been sitting under the workbench for 10 years and we suspect it's no longer useful. Or maybe it's the old color of the kitchen you just painted a snazzy new color and you'll never use that old color again. For whatever reason, we want to dispose of it properly. Waste paint is difficult to handle in the trash. Trash haulers and municipalities don't want to take cans of liquid latex paint. Placing cans of liquid latex paint in the trash can lead to spills and strange highway markings, as well as fines from regulatory agencies for those trucks leaking paint down the highway. All paint is harmful to the environment if not disposed of properly. Some types of paint to a greater degree than others. Before going on to how best to dispose of our unwanted paint, I want to talk about what steps one can take to help reduce the amount of leftover paint we or our heirs will have to deal with. Next slide. Next slide, please. Avoid having leftover paint. The slide should have been avoid having lots of leftover paint because you will want to have some paint left over for touch-ups, especially if you have young children or pets in your home. Before starting, can you back up one, please? Can you back up one slide, please? Before starting any DIY painting project, you should do some research to determine the right type of paint to use for the surface you will be painting. Brendan, you should be on slide 5. Okay, before starting, Brendan, can you please put you on slide 5?
Yeah, it should be on. I think there's a delay on this. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
See if
Sorry
you can
about
move it now. Oh, no worries. Yeah, see if you can move it now. Yeah, WebEx has been acting up all day. Did you try and move it?
One moment.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to see if there's a delay on this end as well. Right now it's on slide 5 on my screen.
Okay, you got it on slide 5. I'll just continue from here. Please move it when I ask, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. Okay. Before starting any DIY painting project, you should do some research to determine the right type of paint to use for the surface you will be painting. Both the type and color of paint you choose to use and the surface on which you will be painting affect how much you will need to purchase. You can do this on your own or speak with the knowledgeable person at your local paint retailer. Once you have determined the best type of paint, selected your color or colors, you're going to want to buy the right amount of paint. This can be done several ways. You can ask the friendly paint retailer what they suggest. You could also go to the internet, and there are various paint calculators out there, mostly associated with the paint manufacturer's website. Some ask for a lot of detail in determining your project's paint volume requirements, while some are very basic. I would suggest find one that you're comfortable using and that makes sense to you, but then maybe also check with the paint retailer and get their opinion. In my experience with certain home improvement stores, I've received both good and not so good advice. So if you find yourself with a large amount of leftover paint, you could extend your painting project into the next room or perhaps apply another coat. Most likely you will end up with some quantity of leftover paint. Next slide, please.
And can you see the next slide?
No, not yet.
Okay, yeah, we're on.
Okay,
I think
but
there's a delay.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're on slide 6. That's fine. That's fine.
Yep.
Okay. You can. Okay. What to do with leftover paint? You can store it, donate it, or give it away, or dispose of it properly. Leftover paint, if stored properly, can easily be recovered for reuse or recycling. Unopened cans of paint can last from 10 to 15 years depending on the type if stored in ideal conditions. You will want to make sure that your leftover paint is stored properly. Most important is making certain that the container is sealed tightly. Before replacing the lid, remove any excess paint or debris from the rim that could prevent a tight seal. Then use either a rubber mallet or a hammer with a wood block to tap down the lid without misshaping it. You could also place a sheet of plastic wrap across the top of the can before replacing the lid to help create a better seal. You will want to store your leftover paint in the original containers with labels attached. While researching this topic, I came across one home improvement store that suggested you could save shelf space by pouring leftover paint into smaller containers for storage. Do not do this. Keeping paint in the original labeled container will allow contents to be easily identified. This is important should you decide to eventually dispose of the leftover paint or provide it for reuse. Ideally, you will want to store paint where it will not be exposed to low temperatures that would cause it to freeze or to very high temperatures that would affect its components. Some paint can handle 1 or 2 freeze-thaw cycles, but why store it improperly just for it to go bad? You also wouldn't want to store your paint in a damp location since paint cans are susceptible to rusting, which can ruin the contents or lead to leaking containers. If you're going to store paint in your basement that is prone to dampness, place paint containers on shelves off the floor to avoid moisture. Once a can of paint is opened and a portion is used, there is greater headspace when the can is resealed. Over time, this can lead to changes in the chemical composition of the paint, settling of contents, or separation of the components of the paint, as well as the formation of a hardened layer of paint on the top of the contents. To see if the paint is still usable, you should remove the top film layer, if there is one, and then use a paint stirrer to stir the paint, checking to see if there are lumps. Some paint can also give off a foul or rancid odor, which is an indication that it is also bad. If there are no noticeable lumps and it smells like normal paint, you can do a test brush stroke on some cardboard. If it goes on smooth, you're in luck. If the paint is clumpy, it is most likely bad and you would be wise to dispose of it properly. If you find yourself with more leftover paint than you can imagine yourself ever using, you could offer your unwanted paint to friends, neighbors, reuse organizations such as Habitat for Humanity, community groups, theater groups, high school theater group could use the paint for sets, etc. You could also offer it for reuse on a website such as FreeCycle or Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. And you also be certain to check your paint to see if it is still usable before offering it for such, because you don't want to get a reputation as a source of bad paint. Finally, the last option is to dispose of your unwanted paint properly. How you dispose of your paint will generally be determined by what type of paint it is. Slide 7, please. Okay, types of paint. This is a broad definition here. Typically, there are 4 main components in paint: pigment, binder, solvent, and additives. Based upon what the solvent is, we can generally divide paint into 2 categories, either oil-based or water-based, also known as latex. By the way, there is no latex in latex paint. The term latex here refers to a type of aqueous suspension In the UK, latex paint is called emulsion paint, and I credit that to Wikipedia, that information. Oil-based paints are considered household hazardous waste. The label will tell you if the paint is oil-based or alkyd, A-L-K-Y-D, and a further indication that a paint is oil-based will be that the instructions will tell you to clean brushes and rollers with mineral spirits, paint thinner, or turpentine. Oil-based paints are flammable and toxic. Latex or water-based paint, on the other hand, is not a hazardous waste, and latex paints can be cleaned up using soap and water. If you find yourself cleaning out an old cache of paint, you should be aware that some paint produced prior to 1978 contains lead. Also, mercury was used as a fungicide in latex paint up until 1991, so you should always check the label when you come across old paint to see if it contains any sort of metals or additives that would cause them to be a hazardous waste. Slide 8, please. So proper disposal of oil-based paints. Oil-based paints, again, are considered hazardous waste and must be disposed of at a household hazardous waste collection facility or HHW collection event. HHW collection facilities and events are usually managed by a municipality. Depending on where you live, this may be at the village, town, city, or county level. The municipality generally restricts the use of the facility or event to its residents and may require pre-registration and a possible fee. This information is usually posted to the municipality's website along with what items they will and will not accept. Oil-based paints generally account for about half the volume of household hazardous waste received at these facilities and events, making it one of the costliest types of household hazardous waste for the municipalities to handle. This year in particular, due to the pandemic, a lot of HHW events have been canceled, postponed. So the avenues for disposal of oil-based paints and other types of HHW has been quite curtailed, and any recommendations would be to just hold on to that material until an event does come around in your area. Some HHW events will also accept latex paint, so you may want to check with them first before going through the disposal process for latex paint. I know that the City of Albany's HHW event would accept latex. Slide 9, please. So, proper disposal of latex paints. As mentioned, latex is considered a non-hazardous waste when disposed of properly, or I should say most latex. However, since latex paints do contain acrylics, vinyls, and epoxies, proper disposal does not mean pouring it into storm drains or putting cans of liquid latex paint in your household trash for pickup. To properly dispose of latex paint in your household trash, you will first have to dry it out. Slide 10, please. Proper disposal on latex paint. Common advice is to dry out a volume of latex paint is to mix it with an equal volume of cat litter or another type of absorbent material such as sawdust or perhaps newspaper, and let it sit for about an hour or so. This works well for a half gallon of paint. If you are seeking to dry out more than that, it's suggested that you take the latex paint, take a cardboard box, line a cardboard box with a plastic bag, pour some of the latex paint into the box along with the absorbent, the cat litter or sawdust that you're using, and let that sit and dry, and then you continue the process until all the paint has been dried. And then you can toss out the latex paint into your household trash. If you don't have a cat or you don't want to use cat litter, you can purchase a commercial paint hardener at your local paint retailer or hardware store. Paint containers with just a small amount of paint can be left open to air dry. You should do this in a safe and secure area away from pets and small children. So, disposal of leftover paint is possible, though there are several steps involved and different means depending on what you are seeking to dispose of. This is all going to be much easier in the future. Slide 11, please. Okay. In the future, proper paint disposal. For nearly 10 years, legislators in New York State have had some form of proposed paint legislation to consider. The Post-Consumer Paint Collection Program bill was passed and subsequently signed into law by Governor Cuomo on December 16, 2019. Under the law, producers of architectural paint or their agent were required to submit a plan to the DEC intended to establish a statewide program for the collection of post-consumer paint as set forth in the law. Slide 12, please. PaintCare, a nonprofit 501c3 organization established by the American Coatings Association, an industry trade group, has submitted a proposed plan to the department in accordance with the law outlining how they will facilitate the collection, transportation, recycling, and proper disposal of architectural paints for New York State consumers. PaintCare has been in existence for nearly 11 years and currently runs paint collection programs in 9 other states, including our neighbors Vermont and Connecticut, and will be adding Washington State in the spring of 2021. New York State will be the 11th state program for PaintCare. Before I go on, I want to briefly touch on what is meant by architectural paints. These are your typical interior and exterior latex paints, interior and exterior paints, not necessarily latex, plus deck coatings, primers, stains, shellacs, concrete sealers, etc. It's a fairly broad category, and you can see all the products that would be covered by the program on PaintCare's website, which should show on the slide, paintcare.org. As well as the products that are not part of the program, such as paint thinners, aerosol paints, art and craft paints, and other items. Under the program, each group has certain responsibilities or requirements of them. The manufacturers of paint, they've already established, they've established PaintCare as the stewardship organization to handle the program. Manufacturers are also required to register, and they cannot sell paint into New York State unless they are registered in the program. Retailers are going to be required to distribute information regarding the program. And also provide consumers with information regarding paint recycling and the paint stewardship program. And I'm sorry, I just lost my WebEx connection. State and local governments will, through their HHW programs, can register to become drop-off locations for paint collection. And residents will consumers would be responsible for the payment of a fee for the program. Once the program is up and running, consumers will have access to increased opportunities to properly manage their unwanted architectural paint, while municipalities will benefit by no longer having to manage these products in the municipal waste stream, since PaintCare will provide for collection, transportation, recycling, and disposal. While current HHW facilities and solid waste facilities can become PaintCare drop-off sites, it is expected that the majority of drop-off locations will be paint retailers and hardware stores such as Sherwin-Williams and Ace True Value. The big box retailers have declined to participate in the past in the other states, but there will be an effort to recruit them here in New York. PaintCare's program is set up so that their drop-off sites would accept both oil-based and latex paints from consumers in original containers up to 5 gallons in size with intact original labels. You should be on slide 13, please. The program will not only cover households and provide relief to municipalities, but all purchases of the covered products under the law will be able to utilize the program to properly manage their unwanted architectural paints, including contractors, businesses, schools, and government agencies. It is expected that the program will help promote paint reuse either at the local level through HHW facilities acting as drop-off locations or through the establishment of formal paint recycling operations in the region. Recycled content paint is a viable, reduced cost, quality product available in certain markets. Now, there is, as I said, there is a cost involved. Once the program begins, there will be a small assessment based on container size added to the price of paint. Per PaintCare's website, they expect the assessment to be from 75 cents to 99 cents on container sizes up to 2 gallons. This is still being determined. I do want to point out that the program will accept all covered products no matter when they were purchased. So if you bought paint 10 years ago and you're looking to get rid of it now, they will accept it when that program starts. There will be no charge to drop off paint at a drop-off location. So no more drying out latex paint and no more waiting for the next HHW collection event to occur. The anticipated start date is fall of 2021. The New York Post-Consumer Paint Collection Program is the 5th product take-back program in New York State. Slide 14, please. Hopefully you are aware of the other take-back laws. The existing New York State take-back laws are the New York State Electronic Equipment Recycling and Reuse Act, the New York State Rechargeable Battery Recycling Act, the Mercury Thermostat Collection Act of 2013. Those 3 programs are implemented through the New York State DEC. The Drug Take-Back Act is implemented through the New York State Department of Health. So those are the 4 programs currently in existence. We have paint that's going to start up in fall of 2021. In the future, next slide, please. In the future, we're looking at the possibility of adding programs for carpets, mattresses, solar panels, single-use alkaline batteries, and packaging. All of these products, you know, they have similar characteristics in that they can benefit from having a take-back program to manage them once they enter the waste stream. And that basically concludes my presentation. So if you want to go on to questions.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Peter. We've got a couple of them that have come in here. The first is, are today's paints for indoor home use for example, a gallon purchased from a paint store, typically oil-based or latex-based?
Generally, they're going to be latex-based. You would definitely, obviously, check the label to see. Mostly, you're going to be using a latex-based paint. Inside, there's less fumes, less off-gassing with the latex paint, especially the low VOC paints, or even no VOC, apparently, if they have them now as well. Oil-based paints will tend to take much longer to dry, so that's an issue with using them inside. And there's also much more VOCs that are coming off in oil-based paint, so it's a little problematic. I would think that you would generally use a latex for interior, but I'm not a paint specialist by any means. So.
Mm-hmm. And a follow-up from another question I saw here with that, since you mentioned the VOCs, are there any considerations that people should have when storing paint when it comes to VOCs?
Good question. Something I really didn't look into per se. I would think, just making sure that, if you walk into if you walk into a paint store, you really don't get that smell, the VOC smell, I guess. So I'm thinking if the seals are proper on the cans, you're not going to have that when you store it. So, taking the steps by making sure the rims are clean, using a sheet of plastic wrap to create a better seal, that would probably help keep that down. I really can't speak much more to that, though.
Mm-hmm. So here's another question that came in. What happens if the cans don't have labels on them?
Yeah, good question. Well, under PaintCare's program, they won't accept it at their collection site, mostly because they don't really know what's in the can. People can say it's latex paint, and it may be, but it could be an oil base. It could be something. It could be mixed. No one knows at that point. So it would probably have to be handled as an unknown household hazardous waste and go through their normal household hazardous waste collection process.
Mm-hmm. And another question we got, why wouldn't big box chain stores be required to participate in any of the take-back programs?
Good question. I don't have a good answer for that. Why wouldn't they be required to? It's not in the law. So they can volunteer. They haven't, as far as we know, they haven't joined in any of the other states where PaintCare operates programs in. You would think that they would, because they're probably a pretty good size of the sales of that paint. But unfortunately, there is no requirement. We're going to, this program's getting set up now in the state, and we're going to try to make an effort to get those guys involved in the program, but they can't. It's not mandated under the law, so who knows why they won't.
Mm-hmm. And that's something, too, where some consumer questions might lead to some stores being more interested in joining it. So if that's something you're interested in, if you have a certain store that you get paint at, you know, pretty soon it might be worth asking them about it. And if they start getting questions from folks, it might move their hand a bit.
You got a favorite paint store you go to, or if it is a big box store you're going to for your paint, and ask them about it. And if they're not going to take back paint, you can say, well, I'll just bring my paint to the little guy down the street who's taking back the old paint, and I'll buy my paint there. Let them know. I guess. It's a convenience factor. It's a small paint retailer's taking back used paint. Why go to a big box store if you can get everything done at one location?
Mm-hmm. So another question here about what to do with spray paint.
Spray paint, yeah. Okay, well, generally follows the same guidelines as cans of paint. If it's a household hazardous waste, it should be brought to a household hazardous waste collection event. Aerosol paints aren't part of the PaintCare program. They won't accept aerosol paints there. It's something that we'd like them to do, but at this point, that's not what they're doing. If it's a water-based product, and there are water-based spray paints, if it's water-based, you could just, use up the can, finish it off, spray it. Yeah, if it's non-hazardous, you can spray it until it's empty of propellant, and then those cans can, I believe, be placed in recycling for metal. If it's a hazardous waste type product, if it's an oil-based spray paint, bring it to an HHW event.
Mm-hmm. So we got a question here. This is one I hadn't thought of yet. So what about nail polish remover or other things like that, or paint remover? What's the disposal for that? Yeah,
that would be an HHW event. You would bring it for collection. It's like a paint thinner or paint solvent. So those would go through HHW.
Yep. And another question here about kind of paint recycling or recycled paint. Can you speak a little bit more to that process, or what happens with the paint after it goes to an organization like PaintCare?
Okay. Well, yeah, I guess I can. As I was doing research for this presentation, I came across the fact that there are actually a couple of counties in New York State which have offered a paint exchange for latex paint, or maybe even oil-based, I don't know, but definitely latex. Shenango County and Fulton County both had paint exchanges where you could bring, used paint that you weren't going to finish. You could bring it there, you can drop it off, and then people could come and pick it up for free, I think, and use it. Oftentimes, used latex paint, oil-based paint, either one, is blended into, they bulk it, and oil-based, it has a different fate usually than latex. Latex paint can be combined, and, it kind of forms when you mix paint, it's kind of come out kind of a grayish, bland color, which can still be used. It can be used as a primer, or they could separate it out and sort by color and then come up with some mixed batch of latex paint of some color that may be desirable for people to reuse. There are paint recycling or recycled paint manufacturers, is a better term, who go around and they collect latex paint and then make a recycled content paint from that material, so there are avenues for paint reuse in that regard. I don't know if that answers the question or not.
Yeah. So another question/comment here about household hazardous waste events. Somebody said that their municipality hasn't held one in over 10 years. So are there options out there for this person? Can they go to another municipality? Are there kind of multi-municipality events? Or is there anything they can do in that situation?
Well, I'm not, in my role, I don't work, on HHW events per se, but I believe that the department offers a 50% reimbursement to municipalities who have an HHW collection event in an effort to cut down their costs and to promote the collection of this material, because, we don't want it ended up in the trash, because that's where it's going to go if there's no place eventually for someone to drop it off properly. So you may want to speak to your municipality about that. If you can check in your area where you live, if there's a neighboring municipality that offers an HHW collection event or a facility, they may accept it from you. There may be a fee, or you may have to, they might expect you to pay for the service. You could, if you have a friend who lives in an area where there is serviced by an HHW facility or event, you could have them maybe bring it to their event. It's kind of a roundabout way to do it, but it's better than having it end up in the trash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll second that about regional entities. I know there's a couple out there, the Herkimer-Oneida Solid Waste Authority for folks who live in the Mohawk Valley. They occasionally do regional events. So if there's anything like that in your area, they might have something where you can bring it as well.
Right, yeah.
So if anybody has any further questions or last questions, please type them into the chat box now. I've got one more here for you. And it's involving you had mentioned state agencies before in terms of participating in or making it easier for them to recycle paint. Can you speak a little bit more to that and what's being envisioned for how this would help state agencies?
In regards to the, let me see where I mentioned that.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, yeah, the benefited from the PaintCare program.
Yeah.
Just that they would be able, state agencies who go out, and anybody who's going to buy paint once this program starts, will be able to bring their used paint to a PaintCare drop-off location. Paint contractors, even businesses, schools, they'll all be able to use the PaintCare drop-off locations to get rid of their unwanted paint. So it's a benefit to them.
Mm-hmm. So this question, I think, gets at some of the other programs that are out there with takebacks is, will the collection sites have to accept paint purchased at any retailer? For example, if you purchased paint at another retailer and brought it back to a different one, would they have to accept it, or would they have to tell you to go back to the place where you bought it?
No. As a PaintCare drop-off location, they'll have to accept any PaintCare program product that is brought to their location.
Okay, that's good. So that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, it does. But then it does, and then there's the factor of the big box stores not participating, and is it really fair?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And with that, I'm not seeing any further questions. So do you have any final thoughts to leave everyone with, Peter?
No, not really. I appreciate everyone's patience as we work through the technical difficulties. I hope it kind of meshed up in the end.
Yeah, I think it did. So yeah, thanks a lot for joining us. Thank you, Peter. This was a great presentation. I know that I now know what to do with a couple cans of paint. And I think that's really it gets to the spirit of why we hold these webinars, is to really give people kind of simple, actionable tips. And I think this one really hit the nail on the head. Again, our next webinar is going to be on Tuesday, October 13th. It's Sustainable Takeout, which is going to probably top of mind for a lot of people these days. And with that, we'll see everyone next month. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you all.